You are listening to the Space-Tastic Mysteries podcast. We are continuing Anna Gale Line's third novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Lost on Planet M-142. Trapped on the hostile world of Planet M-142, Commander Jessa Peacock, Masters of the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau, has spent 3 grueling months undercover, investigating a mysterious cult led by the enigmatic blind prophet, Danielle Jabot. Is Jabot a visionary, a fraud, or something far more dangerous? The deeper Jessa digs, the more tangled the web becomes: secrets, deception, and whispers of an impending assassination. When her husband and fellow operative, Nate Masters, finally joins her, their mission takes a deadly turn. Someone wants Danielle Jabot dead, and the list of suspects is as vast as the stars. As Jessa and Nate race against time, they must navigate a treacherous world of fanatic followers, shadowy enemies, and their own rekindled partnership. With every step closer to the truth, one question looms: is Jabot the target, or the mastermind? This is episode 10, The Raspy Voice. If you have not subscribed, do so now, and hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
"Do what you want to me," I told the dark-haired man, holding a gun to Nate's head, "but don't shoot him." I walked toward the man with the gun and insisted, "Hey, your beef is with me, not with him." "That's where you are wrong, my sweet Jessa. He is the one who broke my nose." I persisted, "The doctor on the Liberty. He can fix your nose. But he still has to pay for it with his life," the man determined just as I heard the gun go off. At that moment, I woke up, sitting straight up in bed. My heart pounded in my ears as I wiped the beads of perspiration from my forehead. I crawled back under the covers, rolling over. I slipped my arms around Nate's waist, so that we looked like spoons in a flatware drawer. "You had that dream again, didn't you?" Nate stated, glancing over his shoulder at me. I nodded. He turned around to face me and stated, "Sweetheart, that's the third one in 3 days." "Yes, but this time I know who the gunman is." He gave me a sidelong glance and required, "Yeah, who? Is it someone we know?" "Yeah," I muttered, looking down at the covers, trying to avoid his stare. "Philip Matthews." Nate lifted my chin with his finger, forcing me to look at him. "I don't want you to be alone with him. Do you understand me?" "He wasn't after me," I protested, pursing my lips together. "He wanted you to pay for his broken nose." "I still don't want you to be alone with him. After what happened before." He let his voice trail off, but I caught his meaning. "Got it." I kissed him on the cheek. "You do care about me and the baby," I teased, snuggling closer to him. "That's right, and don't you forget it," he remarked, taking a lock of my hair between his fingers, rubbing it. "I may not have all my memories, but from what you've told me, my life with you has exceeded my wildest dreams." My lips turned into a smile. I couldn't have ever dreamed that we would be this happy. Especially after the childhood I had. I never expected anyone to love me the way that you do. I moved closer to him, suddenly feeling very sleepy. Within seconds, I gave in to the need for sleep. "You sure you want to do this?" asked Nate, guiding me toward Danielle Jabot's office. "Yeah, I'm sure," I replied, craning my neck around the corner, surveying the room. My eyes caught the glistening glass fragments still spread on the floor. I told Mason not to touch or let anyone else touch the room. The bullets laid among the glass. Bullet holes filled the desk, the walls, and the door. I walked in the room, glancing back at Nate. I took a deep breath. It was time to get down to business. "Okay, have Colin get all the public records on Take Lewis, Sabre March, and Philip Matthews. I want birth records, adoption papers, priors. If they even had a speeding ticket, I want to know about it." I moved around the room and advised, "I also want him to send some people down here to figure out the distance of the shooter to this room and to process this crime scene." I walked toward the window, peering out. The compound seemed eerily empty. I glanced back. "I want to know of every store on Echo 6 that sells that type of gun." Nate jotted down my notes. Probably writing a message to Colin including my instructions. If I didn't know about his memory loss, would say that everything was back to normal. What do you think? You and I need to interview anyone who heard or saw what happened. That would be everyone eating breakfast in the compound. I will have Mason set it up, I answered. I spun on my heel, putting my fingers to my mouth. I also think that we should talk to the store owner of the place Take bought the wiring and all the dealers who sell that gun. I think that's a good start, don't you? Nate glanced over the Quan pad and wondered, where are we going to hold the interviews with the cult members? He waved his hand around the room and assessed, we obviously can't hold them here. I twisted my mouth, stroking my chin with my hand. I determined, I think the panic room downstairs should be our base of operation from now on. Nate agreed, definitely. Quiet. And steel encased. Unlikely to be bombed or shot at. Hours later, after many interviews, Nate and I sat down to dinner at the apartment with our brother-in-law, Colin Vincent. I sat between Colin and Nate. Nate eyed Colin suspiciously. How's he doing? Asked Colin, leaning over to whisper in my ear. Nate suffered some temporary memory loss from the medication. He is adjusting to a 12-year gap in his memory, I told Colin near his ear. Colin shot Nate a sympathetic smile. Colin said slowly, this dinner you cooked, Nate, was fantastic. You outdid yourself. Nate and I exchanged amused glances. Nate countered, I didn't cook it. Jessa did. No, Nate, don't you remember? Jessa can't cook, Colin told him deliberately and loudly as if Nate were deaf. I know you have memory loss, but who could forget Jessa's meatloaf? Colin hit his chest with his fist. Nate shot me his, can you see why I don't like this guy, look. Gathering a few noodles covered in a creamy white sauce with cauliflower, broccoli and mushrooms on his fork, he put it to his mouth. One of the cult members taught her to cook, Nate apprised Colin, glancing at me. Well, I might add. Her cooking is no longer deadly. I peered down at my plate of noodles floating in a sea of cream sauce with islands of mushrooms, cauliflower, onion and carrots. I scooped up a forkful and ate it while studying my two male companions. Nate seemed to be holding animosity toward Colin. He never much cared for Colin, that's true. In recent months, since Colin and I had become friends, Nate had been more tolerant of our brother-in-law. What have you found out, Lancelot? I prompted as I turned to Colin, noting that he seemed to physically relax under the sound of my voice. A lot of interesting tidbits, Colin answered, smiling from cheek to cheek. Colin lifted his wineglass, sipping his sparkling white grape juice. He looked over the glass at me and supplied, did you know that there is no record of Saber March before 3 years ago when he arrived here? When he bought the mercantile from one Terence Trent? I prodded, what about Take Lewis? That's where it gets intriguing, Colin noted, waving his fork around in the air. Take Lewis dropped out of sight at the same time that Saber March appeared here on this planet, Colin continued, until that incident with the copper wiring. He twirled the noodles around his fork and mentioned, I talked to some of his friends, family and co-workers, who told me that Take Lewis was on a mission to find his birth parents. What do we know about his adopted parents? Interjected Nate, dishing him up another plateful of the creamy vegetable pasta medley. As if he didn't hear Nate, Colin leaned in toward me and teased, and do you know where Take Lewis was raised? And where his adoptive parents still live? I narrowed my eyes, tracing the top of my glass with my finger, and guessed, Echo 6. That's right. From what I've gathered from the neighbors, Colin disclosed, giving me a sidelong glance, Take used to show up at school with unexplainable bruises and broken bones. His adoptive parents abused him, I exclaimed, letting out a gasp. I still couldn't believe that parents could do that to their children, even though I had lived through it myself. A heavy feeling erupted in my stomach. I concluded, that's why he wants to find his birth parents. Colin nodded and added, and he found them here in Star Oak. Who are they? Nate wondered, chewing a mouthful of noodles. Colin looked over at Nate, stabbing a broccoli with his fork. Those part of the records are sealed, Colin revealed, darting his eyes from Nate to me and back again, but I bet you two well-connected people can manage to get it opened. That confirms my theory that Saber March and Take Lewis are one and the same, I maintained, finishing up the last of my creamy vegetable pasta medley. I brought it to my mouth, peering over at Colin, and requested, "What did you find out about the gun that shot at us?" Like I said before, Colin reiterated, running his fingers through his dark hair. It was a ESA-78 with laser-guided targeting sold only at a handful of stores on Echo 6. He moved the remaining food on his plate to one side. Without the actual gun, he decided, it is going to be difficult to locate which one. I did run Take's description by the store owners to no avail. "So, you think that the shooting yesterday and the bombings are two separate occurrences," Nate interpreted, sipping his white grape juice. He ran his tongue over his teeth as he replaced the glass. "Either that or Take had help," I piped in, pushing my plate away from me. I settled back in my chair and folded my arms over my stomach. I admitted, I'm leaning toward the latter myself. "But who?" Nate and Colin questioned in unison. Looking at each other, they laughed. For the first time in a long time, Nate and Colin were getting along. I responded, "That's what we are here to find out." "And why did Take Lewis feel the need to change his name when he came to live here?" I surveyed the table, glancing from Nate to Colin and back again. "Maybe so he could find his birth parents without them realizing who he was," suggested Colin, pushing his plate away and patting his stomach. Then he confessed, "That was a great dinner, Jessa." "Thanks, but if Danielle Jabot really is his mother, she didn't even recognize the name as her son's. She only suspected." "She usually does her homework," I returned, leaning forward and stacking Colin's plate on mine. "In my experience," I commented, "people who work under assumed names do so because they are hiding something." The phone picked that particular moment to shrill. Looking around the room, Colin wore a bewildered look as he queried, "What's that noise?" "The telephone," I replied, moving my chair back and standing up. I veered into the direction of the ringing and provided, "It's a communication device." I picked up the phone. "Jada Williams," I greeted, forcing a smile. "You are having creamy vegetable pasta medley with your boyfriend and another man you seem to be particularly close to," a nasally baritone voice uttered. "You are wearing a long-sleeved pink shirt with little blue jeans. Your hair is hanging around your shoulders. You aren't cheating on that," he asserted, "boyfriend of yours with that other guy, are you? 'Cause you know." "Who is this?" I shouted into the receiver. "Yesterday, you escaped death, but next time," the voice warned me, "you and your boyfriend won't be so lucky." "What do you want with us?" I charged the caller. The voice hissed, "Back off of the investigation of the bombings." "I won't back off. But if you will let us," I managed, "we can help you. We can get you a reduced sentence. You are a very stubborn woman, and a very foolish one too. I will destroy you and your boyfriend," he thundered, "and anyone else who gets in my way." Then the phone went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand. Who was that, I wondered. Did the voice sound familiar? No, I decided. I replaced the phone, replaying the conversation in my head, searching for a clue to the man's identity. I marched back to the table and sank into my chair. "Who was that?" demanded Nate. I reached down, lifted my pant leg and removed my 9mm from its holder. I opened the chamber, peering inside. When I noted that it had bullets in it, I closed it. I laid the gun on the table, staring at it. "Who was that?" Nate repeated, slamming his fist down on the table. "Come on, you are scaring me." I looked at Nate, then at Colin. "Listen up, Lancelot, because I don't say this too often," I bid, peering at Nate, "and Jag, I am sorry I didn't have time to pass this by you because we have to work quickly." I turned back to Colin and announced, "Your trip back to the Liberty has been cancelled, at least for now. We need your help and the help of your staff. Although Nate and I are more than capable of handling this ourselves, we can get it done faster if you help us." "You've got it because," Colin assured me, touching my shoulder, "you know that I'd do anything to help you." "What is this about?" Nate prompted. His voice a bit more gentle. "Who was that on the phone?" "A man with a raspy voice has been stalking us. He knew what we ate for dinner, what I am wearing, that Colin is here," I explained. I turned to Colin, smirking, and elaborated, He thinks you and I are having an affair. Colin and I laughed for a few seconds before I related the entire conversation to both Nate and Colin, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. Let's move you guys to a safer location, Colin proposed, shredding his napkin into tiny pieces. I shook my head. I am not going to change my routine for some lunatic, I protested, stroking my gun with my thumb. My gun was my trusted friend. Strong, steady, always ready to protect me. I contended, however, Lancelot, I want you to beef up security around Nate and me. Security outside the apartment, HQ, following us wherever we go. I want them armed. Consider it done, Colin insisted, putting his thumb to the center of his comlet. They will be here shortly, he proclaimed a few minutes later. Are they people you can trust? Nate interrupted, glaring at Colin. You ask me that every time I help you, Nate, Colin yelled, leaning forward. He snapped, you don't like me. I get that. He studied Nate's face as he ran his tongue over his lips and barked, frankly, my patience with you is wearing a little thin. The feeling's mutual, remarked Nate. The two of them sized each other up like two boxers in a ring about to do battle. Listen, you two can take this bickering outside, I shouted, pushing my chair back. I rose to my feet, gathering the plates from the table, and ventured, I'll catch the bad people myself. My 9mm is the only backup I need. I walked the plates over to the dishwasher. I eased the dishwasher open and filed the plates in their appropriate slots. I've done it before, I told them, and I'll do it again. I moved back toward the table, standing behind my chair. It's obvious that the life of your daughter, I started, glaring at Nate, then at Colin, and your goddaughter, looking between them, isn't important enough to put aside your petty differences. I grabbed the back of the chair and reminded them, but you two have been seen with me, and that makes you both targets. Now your lives are in danger, so you two are going to work together for the common good. Do you understand? When neither spoke but continued to glare at each other, I added, do it for me. You both like me, don't you? I poured myself a wine glass of white grape juice. Grabbing the stem between my two fingers, I carried it to the living room. I plopped down on the couch, swinging my legs around. I took my Quan pad off the coffee table. Scanning it, I sipped my grape juice. Before I could read it, I heard arguing erupt in the dining room area. A few minutes later, Nate and Colin maneuvered from the dining room to the living room. Nate sat down on the coffee table. Peek, you know how much I love you, he expressed. He reached out and toyed with my hair and continued, there's nothing I wouldn't do for you, and our girl. I know you would, I returned, leaning over to kiss him. Colin, who stood behind the coffee table, arms folded. And Jess, you know that over the last few months, you and I have become more than friends. Nate shot him a warning look. What I mean is you have become the sister I never had, Colin reasoned before he pursed his lips. You are the brother I wish I had instead of the ones I do have, and Joey's the sister I always wished for. The in-law part is just a formality to me, Colin, I apprised him, grabbed a throw pillow and slipped it behind my back. I retorted, but how I feel about you two has nothing to do with this case. That's why Colin and I have decided to call a truce, Nate informed me, glanced back at Colin, then over at me, at least until this case is over. I grinned from ear to ear. Reggie and Remy to Mom, I heard a girlish voice call over my comlet. I whispered, I'm going to take this. I pressed my thumb to its center and spoke into it, Mom to Reggie and Remy. I spent the rest of the evening, catching up on my children's lives.